Hello, everybody out there in Radio Land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 WIDR or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may turn out to be. Well, we got a lot to talk about on the show today. Sorry I wasn't here last week, folks. I was kind of out on an extended vacation. Did not get home quite in time. The news happened without me, as it was. But we'll be catching up on some of the goings on at the state, national, and international level, as well as what's going on right here in our backyard here in Kalamazoo. Again, the name of the show is Media Cyphers, taking a critical eye at mainstream corporate media, capitalism, and the establishment generally calling out the BS. All right, so we're going to dive right in today. I wanted to start today's program. This is an article from Bridge, Michigan, talking about an exciting new ballot initiative that is trying to take aim at some of Michigan's long-state problems with dark money. If you don't know, we've talked about this on the show before, but Michigan is one of the least transparent states in the country when it comes to campaign finance and campaign donations, which it being America is really saying quite a bit. So there is now a ballot initiative, which have ballot initiatives, of course, have had some success here in Michigan. Thinking back to the way that we had an independent anti-gerrymandering measure passed a few years ago. Marijuana was, of course, a ballot initiative, so on and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and read from the article. This is from Simon Schuster. It's published on July 30th. Michigan ballot initiative aims to reveal dark money donors behind political ads. Excuse me. It's published on July 30th. A potential ballot proposal to change Michigan's campaign finance law could upend political giving and advertising in the state, hamstringing prolific political donors and revealing major sources of dark money spending. A coalition of interest groups has formed Michiganders for Money Out of Politics, a committee seeking to put a proposal on the 2026 ballot that would ban regulated utilities and state government contractors, along with their senior employees, for making contributions to state candidates and a broad array of other political spending. But the proposal would also go further, requiring any outside spending group making even tangential reference to a candidate or ballot issue to report their spending totals and donors to the state in the months leading up to an election. At least 11 other states require donor transparency for so-called issue advertisements and have evaded disclosure rules in other parts of the country. But Michigan would be the first political battleground to do so. We're doing everything we can to close those loopholes, Sean McBurdy, the Michigan State Director of Clean Water Action, said in an interview. I think this will be a major step towards building a better and more transparent government in Michigan. McBurdy has so far acted as a spokesperson for the coalition backing the ballot initiative, which also includes Voters Not Politicians, Michigan Economic Justice Coalitions, Progress Michigan, and the Michigan League of Conservation Voters. Organizers will need to collect ballot signatures from 356,958 registered voters within 180 days to qualify for the 2026 ballot. If they do, the proposal is expected to face significant and organized opposition. The Michigan Chamber of Commerce, one of the state's most powerful business interest groups, has blasted the new initiative, including the proposed bans on utility and contractor donations, as a broad attack on free speech rights. Efforts to restrict free speech have repeatedly been deemed unacceptable, and this is no different, the Chamber said in a statement. Michiganders deserve fair, open debate on issues that impact every community, every business, and every worker in our state, not selective censorship that shuts out the voices of those who create jobs, drive economic growth, and invest in our communities. Political advertising traditionally falls into one or two categories: express advocacy that contains words like vote for, elect, or defeat, and issue advocacy that avoids those terms but can still call candidates wrong for Michigan or gush that they're standing up for Michiganders. You've probably seen this just about every election season. Unlike express advocacy, groups that pay for issue ads don't have to report their donors and have no restriction on where the money comes from. making the approach a primary route for so-called dark money to enter elections. The potential ballot proposal would require donor disclosure for issue ads that run close to an election by broadening the scope of Michigan's campaign finance laws to cover ads that promote, support, attack, or oppose a clearly identifiable candidate or ballot initiative. There have been attempts in the past to reform what transparency advocates call the issue ad loophole in the past. In 2013, then Secretary of State Ruth Johnson, a Republican, issued a ruling to broaden the definition of ads requiring donor disclosure in Michigan. But within hours, lawmakers in the GOP majority Senate amended and advanced a bill to write federal standards into Michigan law, preventing donor disclosure. Governor Rick Snyder, who as a candidate had vowed to close what he called an enormous campaign finance loophole, signed the legislation into law after what he called an evolution of thinking on the matter. The bill also doubled campaign contribution limits. Johnson, now a state senator from Groveland Township, told Bridge in an interview that she doesn't think anyone should be able to run issue ads when they're plainly running campaign ads, calling the practice deceptive and wrong. Money in politics is a bipartisan problem, and who loses are the voters. If you don't know who's giving their elected officials money, it really is just about transparency. More than a decade after Johnson tried to require donor disclosure for issue ads, some 2026 gubernatorial candidates are signaling support for the kind of campaign finance reform now proposed by Michiganders for money out of politics. I think it's important for us to expand the definition of campaign speech, which this particular proposal would do, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, a Democrat who is running for governor, said last week. I welcome more transparency, more sunlight on the process. Under the proposal, sponsors would only have to disclose donors for issue ad spending within 100 days of a general election or 30 days before a primary. That could still leave the public in the dark about ads that urge elected officials to support or oppose a particular policy outside the heat of election season, when most policymaking gets done. And with Michigan absentee ballots sent out 40 days before primary elections, issue advertisers would still have a small window where they could work to influence voters with ballots in hand without having to disclose donors. The other fork of the potential ballot proposal seeks to ban DTE Energy, Consumers Energy, which again is the energy monopoly in Southwest Michigan here, and many state government contractors from donating to political candidates. Beyond banning campaign contributions, it also banned those companies and senior leaders from giving to organizations that reimburse lawmakers and other officials for travel, meals, and conference fees, a popular but largely hidden practice by state politicians. And, again, it's kind of this very overt greasing of the wheels that, is basically we all know how this goes and kind of what it is. It's like, this doesn't influence my thinking. Yeah, sure, Jan. Anyway, we get power outages. Other people get campaign contributions, McBratry said Tuesday in Lansing, where about 30 prospective volunteers had gathered to hear a presentation from the coalition backing the ballot initiative. Consumers and DTE, utilities that provide energy to a majority of homes and businesses in Michigan's Lower Peninsula, have spent millions of dollars in Michigan elections to boost candidates they favor, largely through nonprofits that don't have to disclose their donors but can spend and give unlimited sums. A consumers funded nonprofit called Citizens for Energizing Michigan's Economy has run social media and television ads touting their preferred candidates, both Democrats and Republicans alike, on unrelated issues like climate change action and fiscal conservatism. In the last election year, with disclosures available, and that's 2022, the organization reported spending nearly $4.6 million. Michigan Energy First, a nonprofit linked to DTE, spent close to $4.9 million that same year. The companies have so far defended their political giving in the face of the prospective ballot initiative. We participate in the legislative and political processes with a focus on compliance and transparency, and no customer funds are used for any political contributions. Like that. That's not the accusation. That's a red herring. And obviously, like again, it's this sort of double speak we're seeing a lot in the Trump era that apparently running dark money ads is transparent, and technically they are complying with current campaign finance laws because the campaign finance laws in Michigan are really bad and allow for dark money spending. Anyway, going on. The proposal would also prohibit political contributions by companies with more than $250,000 in contracts with the state government. McBurney said that would apply to companies like Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, a major provider of state employee healthcare plans. And I just want to take a quick aside. Blue Cross Blue Shield, it's again one of the big health insurance companies, especially here in Michigan. And they are notorious for, again, putting lots of money on both sides of the aisle to ensure that we never get what? Any substantive healthcare reform. In the last election, Gretchen Whitmer was taking a lot of money from Blue Cross Blue Shield. And you will notice that a lot of any healthcare reform that she has done, and she has done some work around debt relief, but that's more about, again, that's not about creating a better, more free access healthcare system. That's about making sure that we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, basically using tax money to provide debt relief. That again, debt which in most healthcare systems around the world does not exist in the first place. There have been candidates in the past. Abdul, who's running for Senate, he had a very ambitious plan for kind of like a universal healthcare system here in the state of Michigan. And again, a lot of dark money was put in that race to make sure candidates running on that kind of issue, um, you know, found themselves with some pretty deep-pocketed opposition. Anyway, going on. The company's PAC, and again, we're still talking about Blue Cross Blue Shield, gave close to $10.8 million to candidates and political action committees between 2002 and 2024, according to state campaign finance records. They were the fourth largest donor to legislative candidates' campaigns in that time period. PACs representing employees of DTE Energy and Consumers Energy gave nearly 6.1 million and 3.5 million over that same period, respectively. Also, again, while consumers is the main energy conglomerate here in this corner of the state. There have been, DTE has been notorious in recent years for, again, consistent brownouts and blackouts in the Detroit area and the metropolitan, as well as propensity to create and facilitate sacrifice zones in that side of the state where, again, pollution, runoff, etc. And part of, part of these campaign finance contributions is to try to influence local legislators to look the other way, so that when people are demanding better oversight for these big energy companies, the laws don't necessarily materialize. Excuse me. All of them, McBurney said, would be banned from making political contributions under the proposal. Independent gubernatorial candidate Mike Dugan said last week he would be in favor of the proposal, telling Bridge, Michigan that this campaign fundraising system has gotten out of control, while the reality is today that this is the way campaigns are run. I want to kind of let that quote sit with you for a minute because I'm going to come back to it. Dugan added that he is appreciative of the support he's receiving, a potential nod to the nonprofit Put Progress First that has spent substantially to boost his profile with billboards around the state. He wouldn't call on the organization, which can't formally coordinate with his campaign, to name its donors. I'm not going to tell anybody how to run their organizations, Dugan said. They should be complying with the law. I get a little bit of double speak from Mr. Dugan here, who's on one hand is like, we need some campaign finance reform. I'm not going to talk about who's giving me money. Yeah. So again, see that's that sign of concession. Like this is the way campaigns are run, and you especially see this line from a lot of Democratic politicians who are running. So it's like it's like, oh, I would love to run on like progressive policies, and I'd love to do like small money donations, but I just can't. This is just the way the system is. Now we've seen that disproven many times. Bernie Sanders, again, when he ran, especially in 2020, ended up outraising corporate backed candidates by a very substantial margin using nothing but, what, on average, a $27 donation. Of course, probably more recent example is Zohran Mamdani, who is running to be mayor of the finance capital of the world, could very well be their next mayor based on the donations of working class people in New York City. It is a model that's been proven to work, but for centrist politicians who are by either like the bribery or are just set in their ways. There is no other there is no other way forward. um what did Maggie Thatcher say? There is no alternative. Yes, we just have to do things this way with the dark money and all the political wheel greasing. Fact of the matter is, even in the United States of America, which is has a lot of issues with big money in politics, we have seen alternative models actually work and flourish and succeed. They have a vested interest in making sure those don't catch on, because again, most of these politicians who are taking these large corporate donations have a vested interest in being the voice for those corporations when they get elected and they are in Congress. Now, somebody, here's a critique from a little bit further left, you might ask, is it's like money in politics. And money in politics is very much how we started this show in 2016. It was kind of our North Star. It's what we were constantly talking about. As I've kind of evolved and learned over the years, studying a lot of Marxist literature and stuff, it's almost inseparable. Money is baked in to political capitalism in the United States. So why are we bothering with this? And it is worth pointing out that there are a lot of countries that are ostensibly capitalist that have these kind of basic guardrails and rules around campaign finance. And it is easier for people with progressive or leftist politics to end up in the legislature in those types of countries. So it is not worth nothing to pursue important ballot initiatives like these, and I kind of just want to point that out to folks that even if you have a more clear-eyed read of again it's kind of inescapable in the capitalist system. It is possible to get these reforms around the edges, and this would be a good step towards being able to have more transparent elections, and maybe you get people in the legislature who had more of the working class in mind than the interest of executives at Blue Cross Blue Shield or DTE or Consumers Energy. Anyway, you can go back, you can read that article for yourself. That is at Bridge, Michigan. Michigan ballot initiative aims to reveal dark money donors behind political ads. That was written by Simon Schuster, published on July 30th. We're going to take a quick break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WITR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online on Facebook or the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast. You can find that on most podcasting apps. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello, everybody out there in Radio Land. We are back. This is Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Next article, we're going to be looking at more of the fallout from the big BS bill that just passed in Congress. This is another article from Bridge, Michigan. This was written by Jordan Hermani. Big Beautiful Bill will blow a $1.1 billion hole in Michigan budget. It's published on July 30th. Lawmakers may need to cut around $1.1 billion from Michigan's upcoming fiscal year budget because of the recently passed Big Beautiful Bill, according to a report released on Tuesday. President Donald Trump signed the bill this month following a party line vote in the U.S. House. The law extends tax cuts that were due to expire, and multiple nonpartisan groups, including the Congressional Budget Office and Michigan House Fiscal Agency, predict it will hurt low-income earners and families. Yeah, as we talked about when we did deep dive on that bill, this is like basically class warfare written into legislation. Now, the nonprofit Citizens Research Council of Michigan warns in a report that Michigan will have to pay $1.1 billion in increased Medicaid and SNAP food benefits by 2032 and lose $677 million in tax revenue next year because of federal income tax changes. The report comes as Michigan remains without a budget for the next fiscal year, missing a deadline in July. The budget is expected to be about $84 billion and was already likely to shrink because of the decrease in federal COVID spending. The new law will create an additional budget challenge that would be particularly severe over the next few budget cycles, said Bob Schneider, the Research Council's senior research associate for state affairs and lead author of the report. He urged the state's budget challenges will be particularly severe and urged lawmakers to get to work on developing a budget plan that considers these new realities. Strap in, hold on to your butts, etc. Along with the tax cuts, the big, beautiful bill increased military and immigration enforcement that necessitated cuts and shifts in costs sharing with states. So, like, just to emphasize again, and even J.D. Vance said this himself, you might feel a little bit of pain from the loss of Medicaid and the evisceration of the social safety net, but we'll be able to be more cruel to immigrants, so it's all worth it. Yeah, not really. Anyway, the federal government currently covers all SNAP program benefits in Michigan, which in 2024 fiscal year totaled over $3.2 billion. In the 2023 fiscal year, benefits amounted to about $188 worth of food per person per month, on average for households with elderly individuals. The new spending bill, however, requires states to pay up to 15% of SNAP benefit costs starting in the 2028 fiscal year. Half of all SNAP households included an individual who was elderly or had a disability, per an April 2025 report from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Regarding Medicaid, the federal government covers 50 to 90% of spending for Michiganders, depending on the plan they're enrolled in. Michigan's Medicaid budget in fiscal year 2025 totaled nearly $28 billion, according to the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Recent data from the nonprofit health policy outfit KFF, however, indicated Michigan will face a $32 billion federal spending decrease across the next decade under the bill, making it one of the hardest hit states. While the Democratic led Michigan Senate has passed its version of a budget, the Republican led State House has only moved on K 12 schools and higher education budgets for breaking for the bulk of the summer. And by the way, it doesn't go into it, but they're basically in line with what the federal government wants to do, which is just slash and cut and burn the budgets to a pile of ash and cinder. Failure to reach an agreement by the start of the new fiscal year by October 1st will result in a government shutdown, the loss of which Michigan also experienced during a time of divided government in both 2007 and 2009. Lawmakers are expected to be, are next scheduled to be in session August 12th. Neither House Speaker Matt Hall from Richland nor Senate Majority Leader Winnie Brinks from Grand Rapids responded to a request for comment. Earlier this month, Hall praised the Medicaid and SNAP rollbacks and said he's not convinced Gretchen Whitmer is doing all the proper checks to ensure that only eligible people are receiving welfare programs. Just a quick fact check. The number of people who commit quote unquote welfare fraud is astronomically insignificant. It's essentially focusing on, it's like focusing on the person behind you who picks up some spare change you left on the ground while, let's say somebody is going in and emptying out your bank account. That's so more or less. Of course, there is this long-stayed myth that goes back to kind of the Southern strategy type tactics. Go back to the Bush Senior administration of like quote unquote welfare queens, talking about people who are using the system. Of course, if you've been following the show for any amount of time, you will know some of the biggest welfare queens in the state of Michigan are DTE Energy and Blue Cross Blue Shield and other major corporations. Enbridge is another example. Anyway, due to expected funding shortage, Snyder said it wouldn't shock him if the state ended up needing to call another consensus revenue estimating conference to better the situation. We instantly are going to need to make some adjustments and recalibrate on whatever budget ends up getting enacted, he told Bridge on Wednesday. That amount would ultimately need to be smaller than the nearly $84 billion budget Whitmer proposed in February, he added. And that's before we even talk about the road funding. Nonetheless, Representative Ann Boleyn, a Brighton Republican and chair of the House Appropriations Committee, remains optimistic that both a roads plan and final budget deal can come this year, possibly without even needing a revenue estimating conference. We are going to have to move forward with more aggressive cuts, she said. But at the same time, we have to be very mindful that we can't leave our most vulnerable out of the equation. We need to take care of them and we need to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse, which again is that's when politicians are trying to placate their base. Like, we're not, don't worry, we're going to take care of you. They're not actually going to do that. People are going to fall through the cracks and people are going to get hurt. People are going to lose their coverage. People are going to lose their food benefits because of, again, this catastrophic bill. So, again, what it looks at, Michigan, which is a state who's, again, we've been having a hard time maintaining a budget, and this is going to hit us even harder. And it's going to make it easier for corporations to incentivize the states to, again, more legalized bribery, more privatization. That's really one of the big goals of all this. They're trying to make state-run healthcare and other safety net programs so bad that it's like, oh, we should just have the private sector run this. Which again, the private sector is going to run it even worse, and they're going to do it explicitly for profits. Again, the big myth of privatization means they're more efficient. No, it just means there's a middleman who can exploit the working class to fatten their pocketbook. Anyway, you can read that article for yourself. Report big beautiful bill will blow $1.1 billion hole in Michigan budget. I wanted to spend some time while we're on the subject of class warfare talking about this recent executive order that the Trump administration put out in July. And this is kind of dear to my heart because I've been working in mental health care my whole life, and what this executive order basically wants to do is turn back the clock to when we just chucked people into state-run institutions, or, well, in this case, probably private corporate-run institutions. This is the Trump administration after all. But it's essentially about turning back the clock and going back to a very dark period in our history when people with mental health challenges were basically just chucked into institutions out of sight, out of mind. It's very alarming for anybody, especially you combine that with the recent move by the Trump administration to try to basically violate HIPAA and get everybody's healthcare information. It paints a very alarming picture of a government that's ready to target people with various mental health diagnoses. And you look at especially people like RFK who think that the best treatment for autism is to send people to work camps. It paints a pretty dire picture of where this country may be heading. I wanted to read this article from Truthout. It was published on July 31st that does a deep dive on the executive order. It's written by Leah Harris and Liat Ben Moshe. It was published on July 31st. Trump's executive order criminalizing houselessness reveals a familiar dystopia. Americans love a Victorian asylum, a paranormal entertainment they offer thrill-seeking with the assumption that the days are long gone when almost anyone could have you committed for almost any reason, often for life. Yet for decades, academics, pundits, and politicians across the political spectrum have been openly calling for a return to the asylum. Now, a new executive order signed by Trump on June 24th proposes that states use civil commitment laws to disappear unhoused people, mad and disabled people, and some people who use drugs in the long-term congregate institutions and coercive programs. Welcome back to the asylum. Deploying a punitive approach to the houselessness, substance abuse, and psychiatric disability, the executive order, aptly titled Ending Crime and Disorder on America's Streets, paints a familiar picture of dangerous and undesirable vagrants that must be purged from society and forcibly cured for the sake of order. It reproduces a long perpetrated false narrative that the root causes of houselessness are serious mental illness and addiction rather than skyrocketing housing costs. The executive order ends federal support for harm reduction programs and the housing first model, instead incentivizing states and localities to adopt or expand the law and order approach. By the way, one thing this article really doesn't hit on is the executive order is also full of false information and is overtly malicious. It talks about the root causes of houselessness, which again is capitalism, and talks about how the housing first model, quote unquote, does not work. If you look at the actual data of municipalities and states that have deployed a housing first model, it has been the most effective method of reducing houselessness, and for people with addiction problems, reducing addictions, and also, again, if we're talking about crime, reducing recidivism. Housing first is the most effective method for dealing with all of these problems. So one must ask, what is the incentive of the government to ignore that problem? Well, maybe it's because the president of the United States is a real estate developer and there is money to be made. And there's also money to be made from, resurrecting this institution system. You look at how ICE is being built up, it's being built up through private contractors and private companies. It's basically, this is fascism by fire sale. They are robbing the public till and lining the pockets of their friends while instituting these draconian fascist orders. Anyway, it would also allow police to access the protected health data of unhoused people, contributing to the growth of carceral AI beyond its already expansive reach on disabled and mad people and their caregivers. We were just talking about that just a minute ago. While the publication of the executive order has led to panicked coverage in the media and online, mad, disabled, and unhoused people have been sounding the alarm for years. Disabled people have been telling you that the weaponization of disability against you was coming, said disability advocate Amani Barbarin in a post calling out the overwrought reactions of those who have previously been silent on the ongoing scapegoating, abandonment, confinement, and social murder of people with psychiatric and other disabilities. Online, this executive order has already been compared to the earliest chapters of the Nazi Holocaust, with some commentators drawing parallels to the Operation Workshy order, which began in 1938 and targeted antisocial elements, including alcoholics, the unemployed, vagrants, and others. This operation preceded Action T4, the Nazi euthanasia program that in 1939 ushered in the Holocaust with the mass murder of disabled people. Public health educator Azriel Mahale, who is active in PWUD organizing, that's harm reduction activism led by people who use drugs, posted on July 25th in response to the executive order, saying calls for a return of the violently ableist asylum system or the continued re-strengthening of the deeply racist emancipation anti-vagrancy laws stop just short of calling for a return to legalized chattel slavery or for a new Action T4 order. In the US, the birthplace of the eugenics movement that inspired Adolf Hitler, the rounding up and confinement of undesirables in asylums, institutions, and detention centers is what scholar Jess Watcott terms carceral eugenics. While the historical parallels are chilling, we need not look back that far. Efforts to bring the asylum into the community have been underway in the U.S. since the late 1990s in the form of states' involuntary outpatient commitment laws. These laws create civil courts that mandate treatment with the threat of psychiatric incarcerations for noncompliance with orders. The provisions in the new executive order will be familiar to anyone tracking anti-camping legislation that has emerged in a number of states and over 100 cities over the last several years, with an involuntary psychiatric intervention component. At the forefront of these efforts is the Koch-funded Cicero Institute, a right-wing think tank linked by venture capitalist Joe Lonsdale, who co-founded Palantir along with Peter Thiel. Progressive measures like California's Community Assistance Recovery and Empowerment Act, signed by Governor Gavin Newsom in 2022, enacted the CARE court system, which compels people with psychiatric disabilities into treatment, and as Disability Rights California noted, creates a new pathway to conservatorship. In New York, Mayor Eric Adams' involuntary removals policy promotes similar approaches that disappear people with mental health differences from public and private spaces under the guise of treatment. And a little over a year ago, the Supreme Court's ruling in Grants Pass versus Johnson further criminalizes homelessness, giving cities the go-ahead to fine, ticket, and detain unhoused neighbors even when no shelter is available. The executive order's dystopic vision has always been here, driven by carceral sanism and racial criminal pathologization, language that Liat Ben Moshe, one of the authors of this piece, coined to describe the varied ways in which the state pathologizes madness, disability, race, and class to justify disappearing and mandating people into prisons, psychiatric facilities, and other coercive systems that are simultaneously branded as care and public safety. Various bans on sleeping outside have been described as a war on the unhoused, reminiscent of past wars on drugs and the war on poverty. They're about building out racial criminal pathologization infrastructure along other forms of capture and confinement. It's therefore important to consider the executive order alongside the budget reconciliation mega bill that became law on July 4th. This legislation advances a death-making necropolitics that is distinctly all-American. The mega bill's eugenicist provisions include $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid that will strip 17 million Americans of health insurance and food assistance, leading to hunger, disablement, chronic illness, and preventable death. Hand in hand, it includes unprecedented funding for state-sponsored violence over the next 4 years, $75 billion for ICE and $150 billion for the military, the largest defense budget in U.S. history. Then there are the billions annually that successive administrations have pumped into the Israeli military machine to enable occupation, apartheid, and mass disablement and genocide in Palestine. With public dollars pouring into the hands of the billionaires and the jaws of the military, police, and surveillance states, and with housing and healthcare still considered privileges for the deserving and not rights in the United States, the scapegoating of disabled and unhoused people continues. The executive order deploys well-worn fascist tactics designed to instill fear and confusion into the populace. Critically, such orders only apply to the actions of the federal government. While the feds can give or withhold resources to incentivize states to follow certain carceral federal policies, many states are already pushing back on the new orders. We can look to history for parallel horrors, but we also can find analogs for resistance. Prior to the early 1970s, most folks could be put away in an institution for life with virtually no due process. Deinstitutionalization was the outcome of decades of multifaceted organizing and analysis by mad and disabled people and movements, and the activists, parents, attorneys, and policymakers connected to them. They successfully pushed through reforms that fundamentally altered a century of mental health policy, granting disabled people legal protections from arbitrary confinement. For now, the federal government cannot simply erase these momentous achievements, censor the lessons learned from closing down asylums, or eliminate states' existing civil commitment laws and standards, eroding as they may be at the stroke of a pen. Despite the well-worn argument that deinstitutionalization or the closure of large institutions beginning in the mid-50s and continuing through the 80s was a colossal failure, abandoning people in the streets and in prisons is important to remind that it was one of the largest decarceration movements in U.S. history, a success of activism, not its failure. Rather, a well-organized campaign of political haranguing and media narratives steeped in neoliberal racism has driven policies and priorities over decades that scapegoated this activism against criminal racial pathologization and have culminated in the present moment. Time will tell how the ongoing dystopia unfolds. Will venture capitalists and private equity firms snake into cradle-to-grave services? Have they already done with other forms of carceral sanism in the prison industry? For example, GeoCare, the subsidiary of the for-profit prison company Geo Group, already operates residential psychiatric treatment hospitals in such states as Florida, South Carolina, and Texas. Alternatively, perhaps billions will be extracted from taxpayers and spent on programs that provide no housing and little discernible on-the-ground impact, as with Newsom's Care Court, enacting the true waste, fraud, and abuse. When a war is declared, it not only is about money, but the dispersal of weapons and the creation of scapegoat targets. This is why it is vital to heed what activists in the housing justice, disability justice, abolitionist, and harm reduction movements have to say about this new executive order and what this means for our movements now. We are not helpless to prevent the worst of this. In spite of many who are willingly collaborate, there are those of us who will resist what is coming at the cost of our salaries, our reputations, our freedoms, and our safety. We have seen what this leads to. We must refuse to be collaborative, compliant, nor complacent. Disabled organizers have long been building and preparing for times like these, showing us how to build and deepen diffuse networks of collective care. One such organization is Project Let's, which is dedicated to creating just, responsive, and transformative peer support collectives and community mental health structures that do not depend on state sanctioned systems that trap our folks in the medical/prison industrial complex. We, the Unhoused, a podcast hosted by Theo Henderson, has tracked rising criminalization in Los Angeles and beyond for years, uplifting needed insights from unhoused and disabled organizers. With or without executive orders, mutual aid, harm reduction, and abolition efforts continue on the ground, as they always have. Again, that was an article from Truth Out. Trump's executive order criminalizing houselessness reveals a familiar dystopia. You can read that for yourself. We will link in the show notes. We're going to take another quick break. We'll be back at 1 o'clock. My co-host Lawrence will be joining us. Don't touch that dial. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR. You can also find us online at widerfm.org or Media Cyphers on YouTube or the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast you can find on most podcasting apps. Keep it locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello, everybody out there in Radio Land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Still waiting for my co-host to hop on, but in the meantime, I want to give everybody a stark reminder of what's going on in Palestine. And this is just a quick aside. I was celebrating my father's 74th birthday last night, and the subject of Gaza came up. And, we were all like laughing and cracking jokes and talking about, the life, love, and the universe, whatever. And, we somebody commented, my brother in the 50 way that the very humorous, dry way that he says things. It's like, well, yeah, that area of the world's kind of a bad neighborhood right now. I'm like, yeah, they've got some really bad neighbors, and referring to, of course, Israel, and we'll laugh. And then my brother said, in seriousness, people are starving over there right now, and it's hard to look at all of the horror that is going on. This end stage of the genocide in Gaza, and of course, the state of Israel, again, just completely in opposition to the horror of the rest of the world, including most of the people of the Western world, and even at least nominally in their words, some of their governments, horrified at what's going on. The state of Israel has recently voted on an act to complete the annexation of Gaza. Um, I brought up that story in my family because I'm like the political one in the family. I mean, obviously, I got a political talk show. Um, and they're good-hearted people. They don't necessarily follow stuff that closely, and it gave me like a really a sense of hope that even people who aren't haven't spent the last 10 years examining this stuff with a microscope know what's going on and are rightfully horrified. And that also does speak to some of the coverage in the mainstream media. It's been difficult for the mainstream media to ignore how brazen Israel has been in this genocide. It is trickling down into a lot of average everyday people who are angered and horrified at what is going on. I'm going to read this short article from Left Voice. A policy of starvation in Gaza. Israel is using starvation as a weapon of war. With international solidarity growing, imperialist powers' complicity cannot be diminished by performative acts. And I think, again, this is a dig at, I think it was the Prime Minister of France talking about recognizing Palestine as a state. That's all well and good, but the Palestinians, Gaza, don't need you to recognize their statehood. They need food and fruits and vegetables and an army of nutritionists to oversee it, because when you are in that late stage of a starvation, you can't just drop boxes of food and expect the problem to solve itself. Again, the completely engineered crisis on the part of the Israeli occupation force, who is seeking a final solution in the Gaza Strip. Going down, excuse me. The ongoing starvation in Gaza is not a byproduct of war, it is a weapon of war. A quarter of Gaza's population are experiencing famine, with the integrated food security phase classification classifying many areas as phase 5, i.e., catastrophic. While Israel and its allies try to portray the starvation of Palestinians as an unintended side effect, it is the intentional outcome of their siege. Israel does not fail to facilitate aid, but actively blocks it. Nothing is clearer than their raids on the flotillas attempting to deliver life saving aid or the targeting of civilians at distribution points. These sites have become scenes of massacres. It is Israel's policy of stopping all aid, even in the face of no military threat. Several countries, such as the United States, Jordan, and France, have conducted airdrops of humanitarian aid from military aircrafts into Gaza. But these efforts, while extensively publicized, are largely symbolic. Not only are they completely ineffective, they are humiliating. Airdrops cannot replace the sustained flow of aid needed to support a starving population of over 2 million people. One truck contains on average 25 tons of aid, while an airdrop only carries 14 tons. These airdrops are about 35 times more expensive than land convoys. With thousands of trucks waiting just across the border, airdrops serve as more political cover than meaningful relief in his attempt to rewrite imperialist powers and their own complicity. All right, I'm gonna be kind of pivoting from that. You can read that full article for yourself at Left Voice, A Policy of Starvation in Gaza. Going to be joined in just a minute here by my co-host Lawrence. Again, I want to thank you for tuning into the program. Keep it dialogue. We got a lot more to talk about, and you can find us online, Media Cyphers, Kalamazoo podcast, and on YouTube and all the rest. All right. So, Lawrence, okay, we're live right now, Lawrence. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm all right, man. How are you?
Oh, hold on, hold on. All right, I'm sorry. Can you say that
Yo,
again,
mic
Mike?
check,
Yep,
mic
yep.
check, mic
Okay,
check. 1, 2. What is this?
we got you. We got you. We hear you loud and clear. All right. How are you doing this afternoon?
Just on my lunch break, man. During the week, I'm busy.
Oh yeah,
I'm
yeah.
almost.
I hear that. Well, we got you on your lunch break, Lawrence. What did you want to talk about while we got you on the program?
There's a bunch. Israel. Wait, what have you already talked about?
So we spent some time diving into. We talked a little bit about the recent executive orders about mental illness and houselessness. We also did some statewide stories about ballot petition against dark money here in Michigan, as well as how the big BS bill is going to affect the state. But that's kind of where we're
Yeah.
at. I was just talking a little bit about Israel. If you wanted to jump off and talk about that.
Okay, wait. Before we talk about that, since we're still talking about local news, the Senate race is coming up. We have to try to get Abdul Al Sayed on the show.
All right.
We
Yeah.
got it. We gotta get like we have to reach out to him and talk to him.
Mhm.
But yeah, and speaking of other Michigan politics and stuff, we did talk about Elissa Slotkin, right?
We've talked about her quite a bit. I don't think we have since. I think what you're referring to, she was on the Colbert. I was about to say the Colbert Report. She was on the Late
Yeah, we
Show
we we are
about
not going to
oh,
shame the Colbert Report.
that,
That wonderful, yeah.
kind of dating
Um,
myself as an elder millennial there, everybody.
no.
Okay.
Oh
Yeah,
no, no, we
yeah,
cannot shame the Colbert
yeah,
Report. No,
yeah.
I do kind of want to shame the Late Show though. Like even though I like Colbert, um, yeah, Slotkin being on that show, missing a vote to stop sending weapons and money to Israel as they continue their plans of occupying Gaza, occupying Gaza in the West Bank.
Mhm. And by the way, this is Michigan's own Elissa Slotkin. And it ties into kind of a broader critique I've had about media and the political class, where you're starting to see, as we're getting into this very late stage of the genocide in Gaza, you're starting to see a lot of these mainstream politicians have a come to Jesus moment, or they're circling the wagons around condemning Netanyahu and Israel, but they're not materially doing anything.
Yeah,
Um,
some people are. Shout out to Bernie Sanders
mhm.
and the 27 others that voted to stop sending weapons and funding uh to Israel. Uh, but Slotkins wasn't one of them, and
No.
this is also the reason why we
Gary Peters, by
but
the way, voted no against that. So we have one no, and then our other senator skipped town to go be on the Late Show. Just
yeah.
just to clarify.
So Gary Peters voted for sending more weapons and money to Israel. I'm so happy that he's retiring,
Yeah,
and we need an actual progressive in that spot. Look, I'm not going to tell our audience who they should or should not vote for. I can tell you who I'm voting for, and I'm voting for Abdul Al-Sayed. If you haven't read his book on Medicare for All, it's a fantastic read. Um, if you didn't, if you weren't aware before, he's ran for political office before, and he was spoiled by
Mr.
uh,
Thanadar. Yeah, he's
Thanadar
yeah.
and Matt Longjohn, and they're now representatives, right? Um, but yeah, like that woman, that woman. The reason why I want to bring her up, when you get a chance, check out her interview in the Late Show, and then watch her interview uh, on Breaking Points. And the
Mhm.
comment section and the Late Show will tell you to go to Breaking Points because you had a softball interview, which is what Colbert kind of did, and then you had uh, uh, a BTB interview, of what my parents would call it. That was belt to butt. Belt.
Yep.
They put they Sagar. I don't even like Sagar, but Sagar and Crystal put belt to butt
Yeah,
to on uh on Melissa, and it just shows the type of political time that we are on when you have certain political media figures and how they choose to challenge power. Um, we live in a time where the fascists are here. They are literally running our system, and the people who are supposed to be fighting back against fascism can't stand up for can't stand up for disenfranchised people that our money is going to kill. And if they can't stand up for that, then they're not going to stand up for democracy. As
yeah,
Ta-Nehisi Coates clearly said, if you can't call out genocide, then you're not going to protect democracy.
yeah. One thing I want to point out, what was so brilliant about that interview is, like, Alyssa Slotkin almost was like, she almost was just there as an avatar of the establishment. And what Crystal did that was so brilliant was, again, expose their hypocrisy. You have Alyssa Slotkin talking about how terrible it is that Israel needs to stop starving the kids in Gaza right now. And Crystal pointed out, well, here's your voting record. Here's how you voted on this. Here's how you've enabled this genocide to happen. Here's how you're not actually concretely doing anything about it. And all that Alyssa Slotkin was left with was just like, she got kind of like some arguments. It's like, well, I haven't seen people seem to protest about Gaza more when Biden was president than now. And then, of course, like pointing out, it's like there's literally a protest like down the street right now. What are you talking?
There,
This is
there's there.
yeah.
We have had more protests. We've had the biggest protests in American history
Mhm.
during during Trump's presidency. To
Yeah,
say that people have not been paying attention or people haven't cared
yeah.
is one, not
And
it's
by
just
the way,
not reading media, or
Gaza,
and two,
yeah,
it's
Gaza
one,
has
not
been.
reading. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, Gaza has been part of that. We read a story, you can speak about 5051 Michigan. And it basically they made a big statement calling what's going on in Gaza a genocide. So even a lot of those big pop-up protests that one can criticize for maybe being a little too quote unquote liberal have incorporated the anti-genocide messaging into their mass protests. So I just wanted to point that out.
It's yes, and also you have people who are calling it okay. It's one thing to call it what it is. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's a troglodyte, has been saying that it's a genocide. She's an actual anti-Semite, but
Yeah.
she called it a genocide. I'd rather have the legislation that Bernie Sanders and Ro Khanna and others on actually stopping sending money and funds because that's actual legislation. But when that legislation comes up, you see the people who are tied to uh, pro-Israeli groups like Slotkin's, who's taken over $500,000, over 500,000. It's
Mhm.
658,528 $550,000 from APAC, and that's from tracking APAC. That's from nonprofit groups that track politicians who get donations from Israeli organizations.
Yeah. And if you go
Um,
back to what Slotkin was saying during the election, this is a good example of like, again, politicians, you don't get any credit for being right late because if you look at everything she was saying during her election run, it was all like, Israel has a right to defend itself, student protesters are anti-Semitic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This pivot, again, it's a very cynical read of it is the Democrats know that the midterms are coming up, and I think part of them knows that a pro-genocide stance is deeply unpopular with most of the American electorate. And that includes, Republicans and independents.
yeah, and in contrast that, I want y'all to contrast that with in her interview, she did a bunch of things. She's conflated Zoran Mondadi's policies as free stuff when he clearly has a way of paying for it and breaking down how he's paying for it. Um, she talked out of both sides of her mouth when it comes to uh only one that Palestine and that issue is important in areas like Ann Arbor, but when she goes outside of Detroit, it's not their biggest issue. Coding outside Detroit as the
Yeah.
richest parts of Michigan, a lot of her donors live, and also it's very much coded. There's a lot of things that she did during that interview that when we talk about media analysis, she has fantastic spin. I can see why the old guard like Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and Hakeem Jeffries is trying to push her to be the new face of the Democratic Party. With that being said, when you actually look at the things that she's been saying, it's it's the same garbage as the establishment Democrats that we've had that brought us Trump. It's just brought to you by a person who's 45 instead of
Yeah.
70, 74.
Yeah. And we remember her whole pitch from her response to the State of the Union address. Her whole pitch was, we should all just become Reagan Democrats.
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad and it was absolutely garbage. Um and and that's also the reason why. And also the other reason why I want y'all to look at it is that she just like Cory Booker, just like Hakeem Jeffries, just like Chuck Schumer, they still won't endorse Zoran Mondani even though Zoran won the Democratic primary.
Yeah. Vote
That
blue no matter
that
who, where, who,
un,
what.
until un, until it is a Democrat that does not take corporate PAC money, super PAC money, or has a stance on Israel that you do not agree with. We you see how that APAC money is truly hating people's opinions. That also leads to the other thing um that I wanted to talk about. Mehdi Hassan, like we talked about Jubilee, and I wanted to have this discussion with you on uh, uh, places like Jubilee and others that do surrounded that are platforming and normalizing fascism. And
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
not just it's not just them. We also see it. We've seen it multiple times in advertisement, right? We brought up
Mhm.
Sydney Sweeney, right, and her
Yeah.
American Eagles
Oh
advertisement,
yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Um, and before them, what was it, HMA or whatever that clothing brand with the black kid with the monkey shirt and the coolest monkey in the jungle shirt, right?
Yeah.
Um, brands and media advertisement and things using controversy, racism, white supremacy, and coded eugenics as a way of selling books or selling a product, getting us to get drawn in. And because our show is about media analysis and media literacy, there's two things: normalizing fascism and white supremacy and eugenics type of ideology, Nazi ideology, and also understanding that a lot of these things are being done for said controversy, so that we will talk about
Exactly.
it.
What? No, like all news is what is it? All news is good news, or how to what-
Yeah,
what's the advertising slogan like? Any
yeah.
all press is good
There's
press or something.
yeah.
But yeah,
There's no bad publicity.
yeah, it's like what's kind of left out of that conversation, I think you're pointing to is like American Eagle. That was very purposeful. They knew that was going to drum up controversy and that was going to get eyeballs onto their jeans brand. And basically, if you're not familiar with this whole controversy, it's Sydney Sweeney, who is become this weird darling of the Republican right because she's blonde and blue-eyed
She's a
and
right winger.
alleged, yep,
She registered as a Republican last
yeah,
year.
yeah. And because of that, plus like she talks about having quote unquote good genes, and she's blonde and blue eyed in the commercial. So like take of that what you will. It's it's a kind of a disturbing trend I've seen in some advertising. We saw this with Steak and Shake too, where there was a lot of like I don't know who was running their social media accounts right after the election, but they were using like the German Nazi font in a lot of their advertising, and like they were going to do a special on 420, which is significant for a couple of reasons, but one of them is because it's Hitler's birthday, and yeah, like really disturbing. That one is a little bit more like it, like somebody whoever's running their Twitter account is like a Nazi troll. The American Eagle thing is a little bit more innocuous, but it's also insidious in the way that it is capitalizing on discourse, outrage discourse, to try to get eyeballs and attention on their products, which is that was exactly what they're doing. And also, again, a way to kind of get tacit approval from the administration because they know like the administration is very very obsessed with these kind of symbolic signifiers, and if you give them like a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge, maybe they'll give you a tax break or you won't be included in the next tariffs or something. Now, as silly as and stupid as that sounds, that is how petty and racist the administration is. It's it is governance by like right wing internet trolls. That is these are the times we are currently living
Yeah, and also it's also I mean, clickbait farming and stuff like that is something that's always been normalized. It's always been something that's just a part of uh the zeitgeist being on the internet and things of that nature.
at. Hmm.
Um, I think the other thing that comes along with this is says that one, I'm happy that uh I'm happy that it's a thing that people are choosing to um show their whole face, that they're not smart enough to cover up like the Klan used to, right? Now they're not smart enough to do it. They're doing it because they're just goofy, right? And they want people to see that they are horrible human beings. I'm happy that you're showing us who you are. The other thing that we have to do as a society is that since we do not like this, and since this goes against the values that we care about, we fight back against it. We don't give them an inch. We call it out when we see it
Hmm.
because normalizing, like it, I can't stop someone believing fascist ideology. But I can make sure that that legislation that helps their agenda does not get passed. We fight against their agenda being normalized. We fight against their ideology taking root. It's like that. It's like the thing that what was it in Arkansas or in Alabama where people want to have a whites only club, the whites
Oh yeah, I've
only.
heard about this. Yeah, like a
Yeah,
whites only community.
yeah.
Yeah. Ugh.
They're using covenants and other things that was used to exclude certain demographics, normally black people and brown people, from living in said neighborhoods to to be in their area. Right now, it's going to go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court probably is going to side with them, even though the Fair Housing Act of the 1970s would say no, you can't do this. Right. Um, when we are normalizing those type of things, it is making the rest of our countries unsafe. It is making it more difficult for us to be able to speak out against injustice. And I know that could be a small thing for some people, but that's basically bringing back sundown towns.
Yeah, exactly.
If you've never read what a green book is or you don't know what it is, look it up. As a matter of fact, there's some books about the green book that you should definitely read. Uh, but yeah, like it's that type of normalization is not something that we can just take lightly. It's something that we have to fight against.
Yeah, absolutely. And like again, it's a lot of it is, again, to tell you a lot of what you'll hear is like, oh, this is innocuous and it doesn't really mean a story that we didn't really talk about. There was a Nazi dog whistle published from the White House Twitter. And it was that famous painting of like the angel heading westward, manifest destiny, and it went out of its way to use like it capitalized like the whole like 14 words dog whistle that Nazis use, something we must preserve a future for white people. I don't remember exactly how it goes, but yeah, that was published by the White House. And again, a lot of times they'll turn around and it's what we've seen since 2016, where if you point it out, they'll be like, "Oh, you're overreaction. We're just joking. You're telling a joke." Whereas, like, how much of a joke is it when you own the whole state apparatus and you're using it to turbocharge what is essentially an American Gestapo? I'm talking about ICE. Yeah, all this stuff is very real. And as far as we one thing we should not forget is the cultural terrain. Like the fascists lost it a long time ago, and what they are trying to do is use the state power that they currently have in order to get it back. But I think we've talked about this many times. It's like look, it doesn't matter how hard the government tries. People aren't going to start listening to Kid Rock over Kendrick Lamar. I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen. Ted Nugent or whatever. Um, so yeah, again, we talk about, especially in like Marxist terms, sometimes the cultural opposition can be kind of a container for broader class uprising, but it is also a very important field of struggle when the other side is again trying to create cultural erasure, actively using their power to do so, and have collaborators from the capitalist class, whether you're talking about people who make jeans or people who sell really. I haven't tried their beef tallow fries, but my wife tells me they're nasty. So this is
well,
it.
Well, I mean, okay. Well, I gotta real quick before I dip out. I know that this is a quick change of subject. I have a quick hit, right? Um, I think I talked about. I think the last time we were talking together, we were talking about "Let God Sort Them Out," the Clips album, right?
Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Because well, there's two quick things. One, we have to have a discussion, not today, but we're gonna have to have a discussion between "Let God Sort Them Out" and GTX, because those two are gonna be going up for album of the year and rap
Ooh,
album of the year.
yeah. Hmm.
And I don't know. I can't tell you which one I can vote for. I like right now. As of right now, I'm gonna say let God sort them out. But
Hmm.
but DX is like I don't think Kendrick can lose another Grammy ever in life. I don't think that that's possible. But that's a different conversation. Also, but the main thing I want to talk about because we do our this pod on a college campus, all of these colleges like Harvard and other colleges that are capitulating
Yeah.
to the
Mm,
Mad King.
yeah. There's
We
there's
have
an article, a lot of articles about CUNY and like how they're basically going to have somebody overviewing all of their Middle Eastern studies. They've kicked out a bunch of anti-genocide faculty, and yeah, it's pretty alarming in pretty alarming time for the state of academic freedom. And here at Western Michigan University, been we've only been lucky that we're kind of a small fish in a rather big pond. But don't forget, I think one of the last things the outgoing administration did here at Western was basically put out a neutrality statement, which is basically their way of exposing their bellies. It's like, please don't notice us. Well, if you do want us to like attack DEI or maybe certain leftist radio hosts, we're not averse to doing
it is
that.
it
But
is it is upsetting. It's
yeah,
upsetting, and it shows the cowardice that 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 power has, that those who are in that type of power. It's not like they can't they it what bothers me the most is that you have Trump who cannot conjugate a verb trying to tell a college how they should deal with students. Like I feel like that is the most disrespectful thing out of this whole situation.
yeah. What is it? Not the movie, an idiocracy. Ruled by the
Yeah.
morons.
I
So
mean, dog, you wanna talk about how you wanna talk about someone being like we talked about Biden's cognitive decline. We have to talk about Trump's cognitive
yeah.
decline.
Hmm.
That's a segment that we're gonna do because we have a plan, folks. We've been talking
Hmm.
about it. We're gonna actually start doing some more shooting. Uh, for the folks who listen to us, we have a plan in works.
That's true.
But
Yeah.
the last thing that I wanted to bring up, did you see him go after Charlemagne the guy?
Mhm. Wait, Trump? Trump did? Or no, I'm sorry. Who?
Trump made a true social post about Charlemagne the God because Charlemagne the God went on, I think, Laura Trump's Fox
Mhm.
News show or something, and he told the truth about the Trump administration. Like, no, the last 6 months have been absolutely horrible. From planes crashing out of the sky because Doge cut FAA
Mhm.
officials, the stock market in massive flux. We had consumer spending and inflation, that we are in stagflation now because of the tariffs. Consumer spending is low. Um, that things are worse in the last 6 months because of Trump and his actions and letting Elon gut our social safety net. So Trump went on a true social post, a rant, talking about Charlemagne, and Charlemagne responded on the Breakfast Club by giving Trump Donkey of the Day. And I'm not gonna sugarcoat it for y'all. I'm not gonna try to recant it for y'all. I want everybody to go and see it. It is hilarious. It's hilarious. It's funny.
Is anytime
Go
Trump
watch it.
challenges somebody who actually has some brain cells going on, it's always a laugh a minute. It's just
It's bad. It's absolutely bad.
uh, uh,
Before I go, because I only got a few more minutes, we talked about Hulk Hogan passing, right? Because we talked
we talked
about
about what? I'm sorry.
We talked about Hulk Hogan, right?
Oh, you know what? We didn't. That's actually let's do that. Let's talk a little bit about Hulk Hogan
Yeah.
because there's a couple
Um,
celebrity deaths I want to talk about.
so okay, so death usually comes in threes. So it was Malcolm Jamal Warner. I definitely know that we talked about Malcolm Jamal Warner. He was CEO on the Cosby Show. He did a number of roles. He was an artist, he was a painter, he was a poet. His poetry on on Russell Simmons' Deaf Poetry is absolutely outstanding. I Love My Woman is still one of my favorite poems that he ever created. Please go and check it out. It's still on YouTube. Um, like yeah, Malcolm Jamal Warner, fantastic dude. I can't say much about him. Ozzy Osbourne also passed away, so that was
Yeah,
sad, right? For people
yeah.
who knows about him. But the third death that was in that series was Hulk Hogan. Oh Terry, I don't remember what his last name is. I don't care. Um, so I was in a dilemma. I liked Hogan, as in the character, because I loved wrestling. And to say that he wasn't the GOAT when it came to sports entertainment would be a lie. So I'm not gonna.
I may have made my parents suffer through Suburban Commando and Santa with Muscles
Yes,
as a kid. So
yes,
this is
yeah. So as a kid growing up, being born in the 80s, going into the 90s, watching him on WCW, watching him be a heel with NWO, um, and then coming back to Raw and all those things, um, that character and how that character developed over time, being a real American, get your sleep, eat your vitamins, all that stuff, to the Trump sycophant that he was, right? We cannot say I take the DL Hughley approach. I cannot say anything now that's going to harm him. He's gone, right? And I respect the family's wishes that I don't want to harm his family. He was a husband. He was a father. He was a brother. All those things, right? The Christian in me is saying that Terry was those things as well.
he was a brother. Brother, no, no,
At the
maybe
same
inappropriate.
time, at the same time, I like it doesn't matter if he's either up or below or if you don't believe. But his daughter coming out saying that she doesn't want any parts of his state. She doesn't forgive him for what he was saying about her and her dating black men, the
Mhm.
infamous rants that he would say about black people, the the multiple domestic violence allegations against him sleeping with his best friend's wife, all of those things, him firing a black girl that was advertising his beer brand. Um,
Also, don't want to forget, he union buster. Jesse
yeah,
Ventura tried to unionize the WWF wrestlers in the 80s, and Hulk Hogan ratted him out to Vince McMahon. And
yeah,
it was,
got him fired at the
yep,
same time that WrestleMania 3 happened when he wrestled Andre the Giant, which was one of the biggest spectacles at the time, and he got paid more than everyone else on the card combined.
yep.
So when we talk about Hogan as a character as a whole, Hogan is a lot like Homelander. When you think about the public persona of how Hogan was being portrayed, of being a real American, the all bred American, that theatrics in those nature, but in his personal life, he is a jerk. He's not a good guy. He is in many ways the true side of America that most people experience, which is him screwing over other people who are in the business so that he can get ahead. Him
Mhm.
screwing over minorities and being hostile to the others because he may not consider them real Americans. There's even stories of him not taking pictures or taking pictures with black kids from black people during the 80s. Now there's certain black people that he was cool with, Booker T being one of them, and Booker T still one of my favorite black wrestlers of all time. I have no Booker T disrespect will be allowed around me. But at the same time, the the racist tirades that he said about VP Harris, the stuff that he was saying about Indians, just everything about him. You are remembered for the good and bad that you do in this world. And there's people who's gonna say probably when I pass away that I done did some messed up stuff, and people are not gonna like me. It is there's probably some stuff in my past that's gonna be up for debate. At the same time, we have to weigh all that with the good and the bad that that man did. I like the character of Hogan. Terry, the human being who harmed a lot of people with his actions, is not what I want to be remembered or want to be pushing forward or want to be idolized. But Hogan, you take it as it is because he's just a character.
I did want to mention too, we mentioned Ozzy, and he's got, especially in light of what's been going on the last couple of years, his legacy is kind of complicated. It wasn't really talked about a lot on the mainstream media for kind of obvious reasons, but for those who don't know, uh, Ozzy and his wife were pretty raging Zionists. Just as recently as a year or two ago, he broke a boycott during the current genocide that was going on. And I know, like, a lot of our listeners probably have more of an affinity for Ozzy Osbourne than Hulk Hogan, and it's kind of hard. Like, look, I watched his last concert too, and I may have teared up a little bit during "Mama, I'm Coming Home," but it is worth understanding. Like, we should try to avoid having like these sort of parasocial relationships with celebrities. Yeah, I can have some
Yeah.
nostalgia by watching goofy Hulk Hogan movies or listening to a Black Sabbath album. But it's also like these aren't golden cows or whatever. They are not above critique and criticism. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's also an example of like, artists who started somewhere and somewhere, this is the same guy who wrote, he wrote War Pigs, and towards the end of his life, he kind of became one. It's like, to keep it
Facts.
100%.
Yeah. But yeah, I gotta go. I'll holler at you a little later.
All
Peace
right,
and blessings.
Lawrence.
Oh,
Okay.
also, wait, before we go, because we said we're gonna start doing this more often. I want to make sure that we are sticking to it. We talked about banned books.
Oh, yes.
Ta-Nehisi Coates' book was recently flagged as being banned. His latest one about apartheid. Hello?
Oh, yeah. No, I'm sorry. I'm here, but I can't
I'm trying
remember
to
the
look it
name
up.
of it. I'm familiar with it, but yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So his recent book, his most recent work was flagged as being banned. And he has a bunch of dope books. Between the World and Me was one of the ones that I think that got him the most fame. But the message is his most recent book in 2024. It's he him visiting Palestine and him equating what he saw to what his grandparents went through in South Africa in America during our apartheid during the Jim Crow era. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is because a lot of things that he was talking about and that he saw. There was a recent episode on the Breaking Points where there was a whistleblower, a Green Beret, who came back and said that some of the work he's been through multiple combat tours, but the worst things that he's ever seen is what American soldiers and Israeli soldiers are doing in Gaza,
By the way, I
doing to
looked up. It's
Palestinians.
the name of the book is The Message. Sorry, I had to look. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
So I just want to equate that. Like, if you saw that interview on Breaking Points with the Green Beret dude, and you read that book, it's multiple people confirming basically what we already know. That 2 years ago and some change, what Israel was doing to Gaza was a genocide. We should have said it earlier, but now that we know, we need to act like we know and do something about it.
for
But
anybody
anyway,
who's unfamiliar, that interview you're referring to, it was an American service member who went to work as a mercenary for the the Gaza Food Agency or whatever. Um, you know, they're working hand in hand with the IDF, but he recounts giving some lentils to a small, emaciated Palestinian child who thanked him, kissed his hand, and then something like 5 minutes later, an IDF soldier shot the child in the head.
Yeah,
Is the story you're referring to? Yeah.
yeah. And also the Freedom Flotilla, Chris Smalls, who's the
Oh,
Union.
I
Yeah,
can't believe you didn't
he's
bring that
he's
up. Yeah.
back.
Hmm.
He's back, but the IDF beat the brakes off him. There was
Yep.
multiple people
Hmm.
that was on that flotilla, but he was the one that got the brakes beat off him.
Yeah. A black union organizer getting beaten by the IDF. I can't believe it. Of course, you know that
Yeah, yeah.
it's yeah.
A black union organizer got beat up by government officials.
Hmm, yeah. You know, the
It happened.
IDF trains American police. That's that's worth just another bit of context there.
Yeah.
Mm.
All right. But anyway, holla at you. Gotta go.
All right, Lawrence, thank you for joining the program. And yeah, until next time, we will be trying to produce more content as we go forward. Just stay tuned for that. Um, all right, I think we are at about 1:48 over here on the radio. So I am going to have we're going to close the show out a little bit early. I want to thank y'all for tuning in today to this episode of Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at wider fm.org. You can also find us online at YouTube or the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast that you can find on most podcasting apps. Thank y'all for listening. Until next time, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.